episode of the podcast, I talk with Jonathan Cuartas. He's the director and writer of My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. It was one of my favorite films of last year. It's a really killer vampire film that doesn't hold your hand. It, definitely makes you think. It's not your typical, vampire film. It's something different, and it's really killer. It's something special. So, really dig that, and I hope you dig this podcast. We talk everything from metal to werewolves to, all kinds of things. So, thank you for listening, and hope you enjoy. All right, Jonathan. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. I was blown away when I saw your film on Shudder. That was it made my top of the film list for last year, instantly. I love My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. It was even the title is fucking awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite the wordy title, but yeah, I appreciate it. I think we're excited to be on Shudder. We found a good streaming home because I'm a big fan of the platform. I've been using it for a while, so it's kind of exciting to see your own film pop up.
Yeah, most definitely. Shudder is my favorite streaming service. I've been with them since the very beginning, before even Joe Bob got on there and stuff. And I think that's really badass that you get your film on Shudder. And it reaches a good audience too. There's a lot of good people on Shudder and involved with Shudder. So.
Yeah, for sure. We're still available on Amazon Prime, but I think for those specialty viewers who are into that kind of horror, into different kind of subgenres and styles, that's a good place for it for sure.
Yeah, most likely, and that's where I'm sending everybody I recommend the movie to is to the on Shudder, because I want Shudder to try to get as much watches as they can, because I just support the hell out of Shudder. I support the hell out of your film, so
Yeah, totally. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, man. So what was the inspiration for the film? Tell me a little bit about it, for people that haven't seen it. Just go on and tell me all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm from Miami, and I went to Miami-Dade College, and for my thesis film, before I was graduating, I actually made a short film version of this. So it started as a proof of concept for the feature. But the actual idea for the story came from an experience that I had when my grandmother was in hospice, and she's my dad's mother. She was my dad's mother, and my dad has a lot of siblings. He's the youngest of 10. And so we were in a small house kind of determining the next steps for her life, or trying to figure out what was best for her. And we knew that she wasn't going to get better. So it was just about deciding when to accept her passing, essentially. And I just noticed and experienced different personalities with all my cousins and aunts and uncles, and everyone has their own ideas and opinions, and it kind of causes a tension between everyone. But at the same time, we still share blood and we still love each other. So I just wanted to explore that contrast between the tension and the love that families experience.
Nice. Yeah, I totally feel that. And I've had some sick grandparents and stuff in the past, and other people are sick in my family, so totally understand.
Yeah.
I consider this film to be I look at it as kind of like a vampire film. I think you can come to different conclusions on what you see it as, but to me, I think it's a vampire film. Did you intend for it to be a vampire film, or?
Yeah, it was very deliberately, for me, a vampire film, and it was that way because I think everyone's familiar with that archetype. We know vampires need blood. We know they can't go out into sunlight in their most general form. And so for me, it was a way to not have to explain this ailment or this sickness that this kid had. I didn't want to have to spend time explaining the story or the mythology, because it's something that's so ingrained in cinema and in art in general. So I was more interested in building the mythology of the family. And with the vampire thing, I thought I could just dive right into the story and people would know the elements that they needed to know in order to sympathize with these characters. And of course, I think the the connection with blood, with the vampires, and the sacrifice and the cyclical nature of having to feed also went in line with the theme that I was trying to explore as well.
Yeah, most definitely. Because I mean, that's what I see it as. Big time. It's a vampire film. I've just heard other people say, "Well, I'm not sure about this or that," but I know it's a vampire film. But I think it's kind of cool where it can leave things open. Interpretation on certain things. It doesn't hold your hand and guide you throughout the film. Which that's why I love about it. You actually have to do a little bit of thinking and
Yeah.
stuff. You know.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and when people say that it's not a vampire film, I don't get upset. It's interesting that people can break it down in different ways, and they see it more like a family drama. I've even had people tell me that it's not a horror film, which to me it is a horror film, but my definition is probably different than someone else's. So I just think it's fun to make a film, put it out in the world, and see what people think of it and where they try to fit it in into different genres or styles.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's not just one thing. It can be multiple things, and it's cool to leave it up to people to figure out for themselves like that. It's definitely a horror film on top of everything. I've had people say that about other films that I rate or review or stuff. They're like, "Oh, that's not a horror film." Like, I think
Yeah.
it's a horror film. Like, what is your definition of horror? Like, there's a lot of things can be horror that isn't a straight like horror film. 80s slasher type thing. Horror
Hmm.
is a big genre.
Yeah, I've seen like a bunch of these 2021 lists, and Titan is like on a lot of them, and that was like my favorite horror movie of the year. But I see a lot of people saying that it's not a horror movie, so I understand.
Yeah, I haven't got to see that one yet, but I hear a lot of good things about it, so that's on my list to check out this year.
Yeah, yeah, don't miss it. It's crazy.
Did you like draw any inspiration from like other vampire films or any other like horror movies for this film or?
Yeah, I think my favorite vampire movies Let the Right One In. I just love the way that it's a romance between these two kids, like they're about their friendship and the way that they trust each other in a dangerous world. But on top of it all, it still has these elements that are clearly vampiric elements. So I was very inspired by that movie and also by Dogtooth, which for me again, that's a horror movie, but that's kind of like stretching the definition of it.
Mhm.
And I was interested in the sibling relationship and the way that their foundation and their lives are built upon lies. And that inspired me to create these rituals that the brothers in My Heart Can't Beat create in order to maintain somewhat of a bearable life in the house that they're stuck in. So those were the two main movies that I was inspired by. But I just love horror as a whole, and I love movies as a medium. And I think like Eyes Without a Face, Eyes of My Mother, movies like that, where they mix this like strange beauty with terror, is really where what I'm interested in.
Yeah, and you definitely nailed it with like the beauty and the terror and then like the dark, this brooding atmosphere of this film. Like it's super heavy, content wise, and just the way it's filmed, it's kind of depressing and like it's just really dark, and I love it.
Yeah, my brother's the DP on the film, and we wanted to keep it very static and keep it very voyeuristic. But I think that just went in line with the way that we wanted to tell the story about sickness and family devotion.
How was it getting your cast? Because you got a hell of a lineup right there. Like, how was that? Was all that intended, or like were these first choices for you?
It's interesting because Patrick Fugate, who plays Dwight, obviously I was a fan of his previous work, particularly Risk Cutters, but
Hmm.
our producer Kenny, who's originally from Salt Lake City, which is where we shot, he's actually like excuse me, he's actually like childhood friends with Patrick. Like they grew up together and they're still very much like good friends. And so that was a very good connection to have. And I had worked with Patrick before on one of Kenny's movies, and we just got along, and Patrick just has such a such good taste, and I think he understood what my brother and I were trying to do with the way we were going to shoot violence and portray this family, and he was just down to transform into that role.
Hmm.
And then Jesse was we kind of, to be honest, we lost the actress that we were going to shoot with like 2 weeks before shooting. So
Oh.
we were all freaking out. And now when I look back on it, I'm so thankful because Ingrid is like the perfect person to play Jesse. And it
Mm.
just worked out so, it just felt so right. And she was just so humble and so willing to come on board last second. And she was able to interpret the character in such an incredible way. And then Owen Campbell, he was my first choice, to be honest, because I had seen him in this movie called Super Dark Times, and I just thought he was such a good actor. And luckily, we were able to get him on board.
Yeah, I love his look. Like he looks like a teenager, but then again on certain angles it's like is he a little bit older, especially being like a vampire, like, is he just childlike and, 1,000 years old or something like that? He played that part really, really well. It's like it's a good mystery.
Yeah, yeah. It was a lot of people mention him like he's the emo vampire, like annoying little brother. But I saw him like he was almost the same age as his siblings. He just doesn't age because he's a vampire. But yeah, I think people drew the comparison to George Romero's Martin, and honestly, I
Mhm.
had not seen that film before I made mine, but I recently watched it, and I can totally see the connection.
Yeah, most definitely. I've heard that comparison too about this film with Martin stuff. So that's a good comparison.
Yeah, just like
That's
a sad vampire, moody vampire, but also there's the lack of these magical powers where he's not flying or he doesn't even have fangs. He's just trying to make it, and what he really wants is friends, but he's kind of suppressed by this ailment.
right. He's super, super frail and like like yeah, he wants to be accepted, but obviously he can't because I mean he can't go out in sunlight and he's a vampire. So
Yeah, and his siblings, or particularly his sister, she just has like such a hold over the family that she manipulates everything, and I think it just makes the situation worse. But again, that was a way to show maybe the way some of my family reacted. Like a group of my family represents the sister character, and another group represents Dwight, the brother character, and just the way that their personalities differ and their intentions and the way that they try to care for Thomas differs.
yeah, I can see that like the diversity of, what the family wants, what this other piece of the family wants. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, and then having Thomas's reactions as well, because that's why I wanted to humanize him too. I didn't want him to be just a beast like shackled up in a room. I wanted him to essentially be a kid with his own wants and needs.
Yeah, and you feel for him so much more that way because he's just like us, except he has to live on blood to survive. You have so many vampire films now, supernatural films where vampires like throwing people around, flying around, all this other shit. And, like it's good to have a little bit of a change up to the genre.
Yeah, and I love vampire films. I actually took a vampire fiction class in college, which was crazy. And we saw Interview with a Vampire and Thirst, the Korean one, and I love all the renditions of it, but I just wanted to try something different because I had seen so many other versions of it before that I think the best way is just to be honest with what you're trying to do. And maybe I didn't think of it like, oh, I want to try something unique, but it was just an interpretation of a story that I had, an experience in my life that I had, and then kind of translating that into horror because that's just the genre that I want to be in when I make movies.
Does I haven't seen the short film that this is based off of, but do they tie in together, or is the short kind of its own thing?
No, it's pretty much the same premise. The only difference is the short film is like cannibals, like the younger brother's a cannibal, but I think that cannibalism in film is usually psychological more than a biological thing. So we didn't want that confusion like, wait, he doesn't actually need blood or flesh. He's just mentally ill and needs to eat, kind of like Hannibal Lecter, but we wanted it to be something that was a necessity. So that's where the vampirism really came in.
Yeah, I like that choice. It was a good choice. Not a big fan of too many of the cannibal films. They're just kind of overdone a bit, I guess, and not as of late. Like they've kind of laid back on all that. But I think it was a great choice going the vampire route.
Yeah, there are too many cannibal films that I love, but there's actually one called We Are What We Are, the
Mhm.
original one from Mexico that was also very much an inspiration because it was just a very stripped down, grounded version of it. And it had to do, of course, with the three siblings.
Yeah, I enjoyed that film. Super, like I said, it was heavy as well in atmosphere and is really dark and
Yeah,
definitely
super
dark.
heavy.
Yeah. They did a remake of that, right? Wasn't? Yeah, they did a remake. I
Yeah,
don't think
they
I've seen
did.
a
Yeah,
remake, but
I
they
didn't
tend to do
either,
that a
but
lot. Oh, what was that? I'm sorry,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, Let the Right One In. Let the Right One In had a remake as well, and I believe they're making that into a TV series now.
interesting. I haven't heard about that, but that should be
Yeah,
interesting, I guess. Maybe. I love that movie so much, the
yeah,
original. It's like, please don't fuck it up.
yeah, yeah. We'll see. But all these movies like Goodnight Mommy's getting a remake. They, I feel like all these movies that come internationally, they just want to, I guess, like translate them for American audiences. But I think American audiences already love the originals.
Exactly. I mean, read subtitles and stuff. And some of these, if I'm not mistaken, some of these films didn't have subtitles either. It was still in English, and you're still wanting to remake it. Like I
Right.
don't get that shit, man. It just don't make, and they remake it the
Yeah.
exact same way as the original. It's like that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be frustrating, but I think me now as a filmmaker, like there are definitely some things that I would like to remake just for my own selfish reasons or like curiosities.
What are some things you want to remake? Like, give me a few.
I think like for me it's a scary thing because I want to remake it, but then I think I really don't want to mess up the original one. And for example, like Eyes Without a Face, I feel like that's an older title and it's from France, and I would really love to like put a modern spin on that. But then
Mhm.
again, I wouldn't want to ruin like the essence of what the original is because I just love it with even the fact that it's from a little bit aged in some ways from the past. That's kind of what gives it its look and gives it its beauty. So I wouldn't want to ruin that, but that's definitely a premise that I wouldn't want to mess around with.
That would be killer because, like I said, that's one that hasn't been talked about or anything about a remake on that one, and I think you could do it total justice.
Yeah, let's see. I think that'd be amazing. But I feel like Ben Wheatley was attached to doing that, which would be pretty incredible. But I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that one. I think I've heard like some whispers about it, maybe, but nothing, like
Yeah.
actually gonna happen. What
Yeah.
other films would you want to remake besides that one?
Well, there's always like these classic monsters, which I guess I don't know if my film's a remake, but it's a rendition of a just a classic trope and putting my spin on it. So I just love using the classic monsters as a vehicle to talk about something else. So maybe I would want to do like a werewolf thing or maybe like a Frankenstein thing,
Hmm.
just stuff like that, where it's taking these classic monsters and using them to talk about something personal in my life. I would love to do some sort of Frankenstein.
Oh, that would be killer. We don't have enough Frankenstein movies or werewolf movies, so
Yeah.
either one of those two would be great.
Yeah, I feel like an American Werewolf in London would be a cool one, but you would have to change it up quite a bit.
Yeah, you don't want to definitely. That's my favorite werewolf movie of all time. You definitely want to like copy it, frame by frame, and no CGI allowed in that movie, of course.
Oh
Like,
yeah, you
please don't
gotta
see
do
that. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do the practical transformation. Like that's something that I would be adamant on. If I did it, I would be like, no CGI. And if you're gonna do CGI, you can't do it for the transformation.
Right. Yeah, a little bit here and there for like movement and stuff like that, like here and there, but not overbearing. Or you could come out looking like that werewolf from fucking Van Helsing, which God, it's like a full CGI werewolf. I'm like, what the hell is this, man? It's so horrible.
It's funny because when I've seen that film recently, and I was like, how did I love it so much? Like it was okay, but when I was a kid, I was like in love with that movie. I loved Van Helsing as a kid.
Hmm. It's still a fun film overall. Is this man, the
Yeah,
werewolf, like the CGI werewolf just don't work. There's nothing about CGI that works with a werewolf. It never has. Like, and unless I'm proved wrong, like you gotta, I don't think CGI is even there yet. I don't think it's close to being there yet to mimic something like a werewolf or even like animals. It's you can still
yeah.
tell.
The deer, yeah, the deer is always something that stands out to me. Like, oh, that's for sure CGI, like a dead deer.
Oh yeah, and that's like the deer in the new season of Dexter. Have you been watching the new season of Dexter? Or do you watch Dexter?
I haven't, no, I haven't, but my dad's watching it.
Yeah, they have a CGI deer in that film, and I mean in that series, and you can definitely tell it's CGI, even with all the money they have, like to throw at it because it's Showtime. But you can still tell that deer is CGI.
Yeah, it's like for some reason the deer is so hard to get right, and it's just they're kind of like moving slightly and like stirring in agony, and its eyes just blinking, but it always looks off. And I think it's because it's very close to being real, so it has that effect, like the uncanny valley effect, where you can tell that it's fake.
Right. That's what ruined American Werewolf in Paris for me. That could have been a great film. It had a cool story. Everything was cool. And then when I was a kid, when I saw that on like VHS, the VHS kind of hid the imperfections of the CGI. Whereas I've gotten older and seen it
Yeah,
on like DVD, Blu-ray and stuff, like you can definitely see like, oh, the CGI sucks. But that could have been a really killer film. Like there's a few scenes where it didn't use CGI on the werewolf. It was kind of cool. But
yeah, yeah. You know, they're remaking also Hellraiser, which I'm excited for because David Bruckner's doing it, and he just I don't know
Mhm.
if you've seen The Night House.
Yes, I
That
love the
that
Night
movie was
House.
really cool. Yeah, so I feel confident that he'll do a good job with Hellraiser, but that's another one where I hope if they show that transformation, the one in the original is like mind blowing. The one
Hmm.
where he's like coming together with flesh. I just
Right.
love the way it looks with the practical effects.
Yeah, I think they're gonna have the budget that should be able to do it right, and it won't repeat the mistakes. So if I think it was the last or second to the last Hellraiser film to come out, and they used a different pinhead. They've already used two different pinheads, but this was a
Yeah.
CGI pinhead. You remember that one?
Yeah.
They're like it's the great value pinhead, and like oh, I'm not even gonna watch this shit. I that was it. I saw the trailer. I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm not wasting my time on that.
It's funny. Yeah, I think it'll be good.
Yeah, I really dug the Night House. Like that whole vibe of the Night House is very like Clyde Barker-ish, and the dark tones and the like nightmare kind of
Yeah.
feeling and stuff. Like I totally have confidence in them to make a good Hellraiser series.
Yeah, that's another movie where I felt like it was this horror that I like. It's like a subversive horror where it's still pretty scary and there's like solid jump scares throughout, but there's definitely something about the characters and it's very character driven. And that's what kind of gets me excited about horror movies. So I was glad to see that one make it to a wider audience.
Yeah, that was on my top 10 list for what last year now was Night House was on there, your film was on there, but it was a pretty solid list. A lot of good stuff came out last year, you know.
Yeah, I see people sometimes in comments and threads like, "Oh, this year sucks. Like, there's no horror movies." I'm like, "Where are you guys looking? Because there's so much stuff coming out, and a lot of it is so good. Like, just on Shutter alone."
I can't keep up with all of it, man. Like because I work my day job and all that stuff, and I like to come home and
Hmm.
work out and stuff. Then I want to try to throw a movie in there or a series in there or whatever. But there's so much stuff out there, so much good stuff. Like between the horror series and the films and stuff, like it's plentiful, man. And when people say that, they're not looking, you know.
Yeah, yeah, there are series too now, which is crazy because I feel like series they put so much money into those things, so every episode's like its own film, and that's just really cool.
It is, and a series that really got me going this year was Archive 81. Have you seen that yet?
I saw the first episode and I thought it was really cool, so I'm excited to go into it more because it's just the mixing of the found footage with the live action, more polished footage. I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's super good. It's one of those like mindfuck kind of series, It's there's a lot of Lovecrafty and things thrown in there, mixed with some Cronenberg shit. To me, is what I
Oh,
what I
nice.
feel and stuff, and with some little bit of satanic cult shit thrown in on top of that. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
great.
Yeah, I love Cronenberg, and I love what his son did with Antiviral and Possessor. But another movie from this year that reminded me a lot of Cronenberg, particularly Videodrome, was that movie Censor.
Oh hell yeah, that was my number one film of last year was Censor.
Oh yeah, super
Yeah.
good. I thought it was
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah, that shit was so trippy and fucking dark. I loved every bit of that one, and it got weirder as it got on. Like it was like a descent into hell, Just further down the
Yeah,
rabbit hole you go.
yeah, and the way that it uses the medium, like you start to see the aspect ratio like caving in on itself, and it becomes like a digitized thing. I just thought it was brilliant how the director used the video nasties as a reference to actually shoot the film in that style as it like descended further into madness.
Yeah, she nailed it. I was like, man, I was like, all right, well, it's gonna be a hard one to beat this year as my top film, like.
Yeah,
But like I said,
totally.
there's so much good stuff out last year. It was kind of hard to make a top 10 just because I don't want to leave shit out. But I just try to do a top 10 every year, just throw it out there. But it was hard to do that.
Yeah, I just avoided it altogether because I just love so many movies this year, even not horror movies, but there's just it's cinema's alive and well, especially independent cinema. And I'm just excited now because a lot of these titles come from the Sundance Midnight Selection, like Censor and The Night House both came from that. And I think those were the world's premieres, but now Sundance is going on again, and I'm already starting to hear the buzz about the midnight movies. So I'm just like, hell yeah, where are they going to go? Who's going to pick them up, and where can I watch them?
Yeah, I think I saw a post on Twitter from Elric Kane from do you know Elric?
No.
He does the Color of Dark podcast. I think it's a
Oh,
Fangoria
yeah, yeah.
podcast. But anyway, he was posting the other day saying, "Yep, about to watch some Sundance films." Like, oh shit, it's already started. So
Yeah. Once Sundance starts, it's like the whole new year just like goes into motion and it's just relentless. So it's really cool.
yeah, I'm looking forward to this year and what comes out and stuff. I try to avoid trailers as much as possible because it seems nowadays trailers like throw too many spoilers in there. So I just, I read Rumorg, Fangoria, stuff like that, and I just let that be. I try to avoid the trailers.
Yeah, I think it's best when you go into a movie blind, and my brother's really good about it. Like he'll even sometimes walk out of a theater if there's like a trailer for a movie he wants to see, but I just get so excited about a movie that anytime there's something released for it, I indulge, and even if that's a trailer, sometimes it's for the worse. But I remember I saw The Eyes of My Mother at a festival and I had no idea what the film was. I just like walked into the theater and it just made the experience so much better, not even knowing what the film was about. So I think I should start doing that more.
Yeah, I like doing that. But like I said, going kind of blind with it, not kind of not knowing, leave it to the unknown. Kind of like back in the day, like with VHS trailers and stuff, and even earlier DVD, they didn't give away too much. It's kind of like a hit there, and like it's done. It's not like a full 5 minute trailer or some shit.
Yeah, yeah, and they, especially for these maybe slower, more character-driven movies, they really have to draw in a crowd. So I think they are kind of at the mercy of the fans in a way that they have to show the more exciting parts of the movie. Like if you've noticed, like even for my movie or like a movie like The Witch, they'll show the parts that are scary or more thrilling. But then when you watch the movie, it's a bit of a slower crawl and very character driven. So I think the trailers may give away too much because it's showing all the set pieces and all the scares.
Yeah, most definitely. And it seems to be a trend that way now. I think the new Batman trailer is like super long and it shows a lot of stuff, like if you're a big Batman fan and you're like, oh, this kind of
Yeah.
shows a little bit too much to me.
Yeah, I had like the teaser for me was enough. Like just seeing the cinematography and the rendition of the Riddler, I was like, all right, I'm already on board.
Yeah, it looks killer. Like I'm not a big superhero fan, and I do like Batman. It's more like anti-hero type stuff like Batman, Blade, Spawn, stuff like that.
Yeah,
But I'm looking forward to
yeah,
this one. I think Robert Pattinson is going to do justice to this role because he won me over in
yeah,
the Lighthouse. That won me over. So
yeah. The Lighthouse was great, but he won me over years before in The Rover. I don't know if you ever seen that one with Guy Pearce, but that movie's really good.
oh, I haven't seen that one. It's called The Rover.
Yeah, The Rover. It's like one of A24's first movies, and it's like this road movie in Australia. And Robert Pattinson's that's one of his first roles, I believe, after Twilight, and he just killed it.
Okay, I have to put that on my list, especially since it's A24. I tend to gravitate towards a lot of their films because usually they're also super dark, not necessarily horror, but they do a lot of,
Yeah,
but it's like that kind of like really shit you got to think about horror. It's not stone in your face.
yeah. This one's very brooding, and I think it was an inspiration for me. Just as a filmmaker, it's very haunting, and it's not a horror movie, but it definitely feels like cataclysmic, and it feels very haunting. It just stays with you, like it has that heavy atmosphere that I like.
Also on since you're talking about atmosphere and stuff, like the score for your film, like was all that like kind of I like that was it all like I like the synthwave stuff. It kind of added like another dark layer to it and stuff. But were they like was that intended like to add more flavor to the film with the synthwave stuff or
With the witch stuff, sorry.
well like music you had in the movie and stuff is kind of like
Oh
synthy,
yeah.
really dark synthy shit. Like I think that added another
Oh
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
layer of darkness to it.
I think it's always fun to dissect like the musical palette of a film, like especially when you're talking about score versus soundtrack, because the score was very minimal and we wanted it to be kind of in the background and be like these additional drones that add to the dread of certain scenes. But I think we also indulged in the silence of many moments. But as far as the soundtrack, like for the karaoke tunes, the one that's like a synthy sort of 80s inspired thing was made by a friend of mine, and I just feel like it adds like this strangeness to the film because the score is very minimal and um, brooding, but then you have these more pronounced tracks like the soul song and this synthwave song, and it adds to the strangeness of this family. Like they're just trying to get by with karaoke, but even the songs they pick are like underrated gems.
Hmm.
And I felt like it also placed it in a timeless place because for me, the film, if I had to set it at any time period, I feel like it'd be early 2000s, but it almost feels like we're in the 80s sometimes in the house because they haven't renovated anything. All the technology they use is old because they don't have money. And so it just felt right to have these anachronistic songs peppered in.
Yeah, it was hard for me to tell actually what time period this was too, because it's like, is this like the 90s? It kind of looks like the 90s to me. And then having the
Yeah.
Christmas tree up during the whole thing, I was like, is it actual Christmas? And it's not, like what's going on here?
Yeah, I love that when movies feel like placeless and timeless. Like The Eyes of My Mother had that element, and also this other movie, It Follows. I felt
Hmm.
like that movie was like, wait, is this the 80s? But then people were driving like modern cars, and I like that confusion.
Yeah, most definitely. And right now, like the '90s is kind of like the new '80s when it comes to like film and like anything you see now, the way people dress or like going back to the '90s, which is cool because I love the
Yeah,
'90s. I'm a '90s kid. I was born in '85, but '90s were like when I actually
yeah,
enjoyed myself. And so that's kind of
yeah,
cool.
totally. Yeah, I was born in '92, so I think I was like, yeah, through like when I was 5 to 8 years old, it was like the tail end of the '90s. But I think I consider myself a '90s kid because the very early 2000s still felt like '90s plus, and so I love that. I totally love that aesthetic, and when you see it in films, like especially a film like Super Dark Times, the way that they do it is really
Mhm.
cool, and it feels like a change because you're right. There's so many '80s movies that when you watch the '90s one, it feels like something fresh.
Yeah, and it's like and the nostalgia hits me so hard with these '90s, films or want to be filmed in the '90s movies that are coming out now. It's like, man, they know that pretty good. Like is this
Yeah,
that feeling? I love that because it's that's something about nostalgia can really capture your attention.
yeah, it does. Like the show Yellow Jackets, I think it's set in the '90s, and there's some
Hmm.
funny references to music.
Yeah, I'm on the second to the last episode of that right now. I've been trying to finish it up. I like it a lot.
Yeah,
It hasn't got to the payoff yet for me yet. You know what I mean? Like there's a huge build up. Like every episode, all the way up to like what I'm on 8 right now, is still just building up, building up, building up. I'm like, all right, come on now, I want to see what's going on here. I know there's something supernatural going on that's kind of led to that. I want to see what's going on. So I'm enjoying
yeah.
it though. I love the music and stuff, and it definitely has that '90s feel to it.
There's so many elements in that show. Like there's so many different kinds of horror, I guess you could say. And yeah, I feel you. I was just like, all right, when is this gonna pay off? Because there's so many things are building up, especially like the supernatural elements are pretty freaky. Now I'm just like waiting for more.
Yeah, I mean, without any spoilers, being I'm only on episode 8, I still got like was it one or two more left? I think one more left, but yeah, I think there's some Wendigo shit going on, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I kind of hope it is because I like the whole Wendigo myth and everything. So I
Yeah,
guess I'll have to find out.
yeah, yeah. You only have like one left, so you'll see.
Yeah, I can't wait for. Hopefully, it's a good payoff. Like
I feel like they're gonna do another season. So
Yeah, I think it's already been signed up for another season. I was listening to the Colors of the Dark podcast, and I think they were talking about that. So that's a good thing. So
yeah,
it's got a lot of
yeah,
room to breathe.
for sure.
There's
Excited.
also another really good series that's out that a lot of people don't know about. It's called I think it's The Servant or Servant, and it's on iTunes, the Apple network or
Yeah, I
whatever they
love
got
that
going
show.
on. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
And yeah, the new season of that just started a couple days ago, or yesterday
Oh,
actually. Yeah,
did it
Friday.
start?
Yeah, the new season started.
Nice. I was waiting for that, so I need to get on it.
Yeah, I was happy to know that M. Night Shyamalan's kind of back. That's definitely M. Night
Yeah,
Shyamalan not trying to
yeah,
be something else.
yeah. Oh yeah, I thought it was cool.
Yeah, that's another one too, man. It's like it leads you on like through the whole first season and stuff. It's like, what the
Yeah,
hell is going on? Like, is this a cult? Is this what are
yeah,
these people like? Is it demonic? Like, I like that though. It makes me think.
yeah. It is, and it leaves space to like explore these weird characters because they're all kind of unlikable in a way, but then you almost sympathize with like the evil. It's a weird show, but I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's one of the most unique shows on TV right now, if you ask me. And like, it's totally doing its own thing, and it's super fucking weird.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Even the way it's shot is very cool.
Yeah, most definitely. What are some of your like all-time favorite horror movies? I know you already mentioned a few of them, but what are some more like some of your all-time favorites?
Hmm. I really like Cronenberg stuff, particularly. I don't know if you'd call this horror, but the movie Crash is really good.
Hmm.
I love Videodrome. I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is up there. Also, The Exorcist scared the shit out of me when I was growing up, especially the the face, Pazuzu's face, the white face that pops up for like half a second during Father Karras's dream. I think
Hmm.
that scarred me more than any of the more torturous elements with Linda Blair. It was just that face like really stayed with me for some reason. But I think that one's up there. And then of course, like Eyes Without a Face, The Eyes of My Mother's a more modern film I'm a big fan of. I've been getting into Giallo lately.
Hmm.
I think, especially the modern ones like Knife Plus Heart was really fucking cool. And I try to recommend that movie to any horror fan I meet. So if you haven't seen that, you should check it out.
That shit's been on my list for like what 2 years now, and I still have not seen it. Hopefully, it's still streaming on Shudder. So hopefully, it's still on there. I'm gonna watch that. That's gonna be my goal this year is to watch that movie because I've heard nothing
Yeah,
but good things.
I think it is. I think it's on Shudder. But I think another film for me is Possession. The I forgot the director's name, but the one from the '80s.
Hmm.
That movie's like insanity. And it's kind of messy, but that's what makes it fun and makes it like super disturbing. But yeah, I feel like whenever someone asks me my favorites, I just go blank, but I know that I have more.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, like I can't just narrow it down to one myself. If I'm asked what my favorite films are, like it's a variety of them. It's hard. You can't just narrow it down to really a list. Even though I ask people that sometimes, oh, what's your top five or whatever. Now I just ask, what's your favorite horror movies? It makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I saw Carrie recently and I thought that was really good. I hadn't seen it ever,
The
which
original.
is crazy. Yeah, it took me so long to see that, but I loved it.
The book is great too. Like, yeah, but I like both. Like the movie and the book, both are really cool. Stephen King does no wrong
Hmm.
with me.
Yeah, yeah, so much good stuff. I
I
think
just
another one's
oh, what were you about to say?
oh, just one more movie, and it is a vampire movie. It's called The Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. I
Oh, hell
love that
yeah.
take. I love that take.
So different, so good.
Yeah, and just like the cultural elements, like the way that she blended like being from Iran and then America and like that combination, and it's just so cool.
Yeah, it was spot on. I remember first time seeing that one, it blew me away. Especially it was all in like black and white too, so it already started off really different. I'm like, oh, this is cool. But
Yeah.
when it finished up, I was like, damn, that was fucking badass.
Yeah, I did this I was like a guest programmer for a movie theater in Miami called
Hmm.
Tower Theater, and I was my brother and I were able to pick any film to show to an audience, and we picked Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. And watching it in a theater because I had never seen it in a theater, it just made it so much better.
Yeah, especially also having a really killer score. I bet it sounded great through like the theater speakers and shit.
Yeah, that's a great soundtrack.
Yeah, I love that movie. I think I watched that like for a fifth time or some shit on. I think Joe Bob had that on the Joe Bob show or whatever, and that was really cool. He had that film on there. I'm pretty sure he did. This has been a few years now when he had it on there, but I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen about 4 times.
Do you follow the Joe Bob Last Drive-In on Shudder?
No, I don't, but I've seen it pop up on so many lists, and I always see it there. And I need to just like dive into that.
Oh, most definitely do. I used to watch a little bit of his show back in the day when he did Monster Vision on TNT, I think it was, but we never had
Mm,
cable as a kid, and that was a cable channel, so I could only watch it if I was like at my cousin's house or some shit or at a friend's house. I would get like glances of it, little pieces of it. But
yeah,
I remember Joe Bob, and now seeing him back, it's like it adds so much to the film with his commentary because he's like a fucking robot of facts and stuff. Like I don't know how he remembers all
yeah,
this shit. Like it's insane.
that's amazing. Yeah, I'll have to check it out because I love those kind of shows.
Yeah, and they have a bunch of the back episodes on Shudder too, so you can go back and rewatch all the older ones and everything. But it's cool. And
Nice.
then when the nights it does come on, like they got a new Valentine Day special coming out in February, and you can live tweet
Nice.
with Darcy and all the stuff, the co-host and everything. It's like a giant group thing you can do together without actually being together, and it's fun.
Nice. Yeah, I'll check it out for sure.
It's perfect for a person like me. I'm very introverted. I don't like crowds and I don't like being around people too much. Even though I was in a fucking metal band for like 15 years, but if I ain't got a guitar, in my hands or something, like I can't. It's hard for me to do like the whole people stuff.
Yeah, it's hard. And I'm from Miami, so it's like the crowds are always a thing. But not, I do love staying home and just watching movies. But it's cool. It's interesting you mentioned metal because at one point Dwight's character, I was gonna have him listening to like hardcore and metal. And
Mhm.
he's like the scene where he's pulling the screwdriver out of his leg. Spoiler alert. I was gonna have him listening to like heavy metal or something to kind of numb the pain, but I guess it was a little silly, so we took that out.
I could definitely hear that, like going along with that. I hear some badass double bass drumming and shit, some heavy guitar riffs on top of
Yeah,
there.
yeah, like Demolition Hammer.
That'd be fucking killer. I like when like horror and metal, collide like film wise and stuff. There's a good bit of like horror metal films out there, but I love that
Yeah,
combination, man.
yeah. The Devil's Candy was really cool, and also Green Room. I think is like a very just as like a movie about the hardcore scene. I was like my brothers were in hardcore bands growing up, and we would go to shows all the time. And Green Room is like a very accurate interpretation of that scene.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Even like I did mostly like the stuff we were doing was like black and doom metal, or if you want to call that sludge
Nice.
metal. But we
Yeah.
played some places very similar to that with some, really sketchy fucking people. We didn't know till we got there in the middle of nowhere and stuff. Mostly we're dealing like rednecks, like some fucked up
Damn.
redneck people and shit, man. And yeah, we came in some situations, nothing like Green Room, but still, it could have
No,
ended up pretty bad if we weren't got the fuck out of there when we did, because we're only a three piece. I mean, but there's like
damn.
hundreds of freaking rednecks at this one show that didn't like my guitar tone very much or some shit like that, and my drummer told him to go
Oh,
fuck
shit.
himself, and and then he started calling his buddies.
Fuck.
Like, and then you got all these redneck guys coming about to, wanting to start some shit with us. So he jumped into the van and hauled ass. It was somewhere out in North Carolina. But
So you just barely avoided a green room
yeah,
situation.
pretty much, dude. And there was blood on the ceiling in this place. I noticed that when we first got there. There was fucking
Jeez.
blood and on the ceiling. Not a lot of blood, but I saw blood spray on the fucking ceiling. I was like, ah,
Fuck.
man. So that's a little weird. We played
Damn.
some crazy places before, but this one has had like a real bad feeling. It wasn't good. And the people that were running it weren't good. Like, we played our set
Yeah.
and everything, but we got the fuck out of there when it was over.
It sounds about right. Like I never went to one of those backwoods venues because I mean in Florida I guess it's a little more suburban or urban, but the only thing was just like fights breaking out in the mosh pit, but it was never anything scary like that.
We played down in Florida at a thing called Wormfest, or yeah, I think it was Wormfest. I can't remember where in Florida. I think it was like Jacksonville, maybe. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah,
We played
probably.
down in Florida, and we played our set and everything. It was a big festival and shit. Then I was out there watching some other bands, and some jackass was doing some crazy karate shit and actually hit my wife in the back of the
Oh my
head.
God.
So my wife started cussing him out and threw his ass against the thing. And he's going after my wife. So then I'm coming down there going after this dude. So I take the dude and I throw him across the floor there. Then he's got like 10 fucking buddies. They get around in a circle on my ass. My wife's going
Oh my
for a knife.
God.
My
Oh
drummer's back
shit.
there. He's about to go for his shit. I'm like, oh my God. Luckily, it did not escalate after that. I ended up kicking the dude out that was causing the trouble. But I was like, man, it almost got pretty wild down in Florida.
That sounds nuts.
And all this relates to the green room because shit can go down like that. Like, that's what's so scary about the green room. It's like, man, that's some
Yeah.
realistic shit that could happen.
Green Room is so good. Like speaking of practical effects, like those are some intense practical effects.
The scene where he grabs the guy's arm and through the door and starts cutting it. I'm like,
Oh
fuck,
my
dude.
God.
Yeah,
That was insane.
you
We
can
we
just feel
wanted
that.
practical, like our film is practical effects. And we didn't have many prosthetics, but I was very adamant on not having fake blood because there is a good amount of blood. And I did research on like having dark blood where it's almost like purple, and I
Mhm.
guess I was particular about that, and I didn't really want like CGI splatter, especially at our budget. It would have looked like shit. So it was good to have like our makeup artists bring solid blood.
Yeah, the gore and stuff was great. Like I said, no CGI was always, that was a plus. But yeah, very realistic gore. I thought the blood looked good.
Yeah, and a lot of times it was like, how do we show less to make it feel like more? Like, how do we strip back? Because we did have some bigger pieces planned. Like, we were going to show the first victim like getting his throat slit, but then at the end of the day, we were like, it almost seems like more intense and more violent if you just show their faces and their reactions.
Hmm.
And so we opted for that route and kind of like a suggestive thing with more of a sound design. Like you hear the slicing and we can just already see it.
Yeah, lets the mind take control of what's going on there. Like, man, is he really getting that fucked up and stuff? Like, less is more sometimes when it comes to violence.
Yeah, it's almost like a setup payoff because then when they pour the blood into the bowl, you're like, okay, that's what happened. Like it's a confirmed thing. So it's almost like suggested violence. And we had another thing that we talked about was like emotional violence. Like how does the violence affect the psyche of the characters? And particularly for this movie, it was very important for the characters and the way that they were decaying over time.
Yeah. Who did your effects and everything?
We had this makeup artist, her name's Sherelle Nesselrode, and she was on set applying prosthetics and working with the blood and the blood effects and blood
Hmm.
gags. But the person who designed the prosthetics, like the burn that Thomas has on his arm after throwing the paper airplane out and exposing his arm to sunlight, like those pieces, they were designed by Abigail Steele, which she actually worked on Hereditary because we that was also shot in Salt Lake City.
Hmm. That's
So very
badass.
cool connection. I was like a big fan, and I was excited to have her working on it, just because obviously Hereditary is like a very important film for horror in the past decade, I would say.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, that was a that was a dark one.
Yeah, it definitely has more prosthetics and more intense special effects than ours did, but it was cool to still work with some of the same talent.
Yeah, and it definitely paid off. Like, so you got the effects that are there, like the makeup and everything looks great, very realistic. No CGI splatter.
Yeah, we didn't have we the only thing that we added that was like I guess if you even call it that, it was like the little flies that buzz around, like the corpses.
Oh
Those
yeah,
were
yeah.
all fake. But even with that, I remember I saw the first version of it and there were like a lot of flies, and I was still like, all right, let's tone it down. Let's have like only two little flies buzzing around because I wanted to just still feel like super grounded.
Hmm. Yeah, I didn't even notice those are CGI, so that was well done.
Yeah, yeah,
And I usually catch shit like that because when I write my reviews and everything, like if you got CGI on your movie, I'm like, God damn it, like like that kind of takes some points off. Unless it's like
yeah,
put where it needs to be, but if it's like overly done, like you got CGI monsters running around, like I'm not really interested.
yeah. There's minimal things like there's the blades and the shanks where they like if someone gets stabbed, we added a blade digitally, but
Hmm.
that's you don't even notice that because it's like there's the motion blur of the actual stab happening, so there's no way to notice, but it just adds that element that makes it believable.
Yeah, I mean, you can't even really catch stuff like that with the human eye, I guess, can't really catch that because it blends in so well.
Yeah, I remember we had a working cut, and it was a cut that we send out to a lot of festivals, and I almost did like some sort of a study for myself where I sent a version where there was the when he gets stabbed in the leg with the screwdriver, there's this version did not have the shank
Hmm.
digitally inserted, so it was just like the handle of the screwdriver. And I was like, I wonder if anyone will ever notice that he's getting stabbed with nothing. and no one ever brought it up. And it just makes you think like, oh, it's just such a fast scene that no one even notices that thing. Of course, the final movie has it, but this cut never had it.
Wow. Just kind of, I guess we put it there with our minds, like we don't even
Yeah,
notice that.
yeah,
It
yeah,
just fills in the blanks.
yeah.
It,
I noticed because I'm just looking at that, but they're probably not looking at that. So it was an interesting thing to look at when I was like sending out the cut.
That's killer. I also saw recently that you got nominated for a Fangoria Chainsaw Award, so congratulations on that.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like I was not expecting that at all. And the whole COVID thing kind of made it confusing because at first I was like, wait, is this a 2020 film? Is this a 2021 film? So I remember the Fangoria Chainsaw nominees were announced last year and I was like a little bit bummed. I'm like, man, I wish I was nominated for something. So when I saw it this year, I actually saw it yesterday for the first time. I was really excited. Like my brother called me and everything, and we were talking about how when we were in film school, we would always talk about how we would pay Fangoria to like put a spread of our movie in their publication. So it's kind of cool how it
Hmm.
went like full circle now.
That's way cool, man. I mean, like Fangoria and Rue Morgue are like the best when it comes to horror magazines, and they're
For
the
sure.
fucking best.
Yeah, and just being like in being alongside the other nominees, like it still feels surreal to me, man. Like I feel like my movie's not up to that level, like especially like when you see the Vigil and Saint Maud and Censor, like being in the same category, it's fucking crazy to me.
It's a hell of a list. Like the fucking way killer. Like I'm sure you're over the
Yeah,
moon about it.
yeah, it's exciting for sure. And just connecting with the filmmakers that I have, like I've been able to talk to David Bruckner a bit. And for me, this is just a way to fulfill like my horror fantasies of like meeting all these cool directors, and it's been good.
That's kind of what I'm doing here with the podcast. Like I get to talk to all kinds of badass directors, actors. Like I'm like, holy
Yeah,
shit, 'cause I've been a horror fan all my life. So I totally understand that.
it's so cool now that you can just like reach people like that and have a conversation with them without even meeting them in person and
It's
going in depth
insane.
about their films. Yeah, awesome.
We couldn't do that back in the day, so that's a plus for technology. Technology can
Yeah,
be a bitch, but this is like I think, it's really cool. Like, oh, I can reach out on Twitter, like one of my favorite actors, and they respond back to me most of the time. Like Tony Todd shares my cat pictures and stuff. I'm like, how crazy is that?
sick. Tony,
Fucking Tony Todd.
damn, that's
I had
amazing.
I had D Snyder share. I was doing something. I was posting about D Snyder about some shit or whatever. It's like, oh, we need a Strangeland 2 or some shit. Hey, you should come on the podcast. And he fucking like, hey, I would love to come on the podcast. He tweeted it. I tried to get in touch with him via Messenger and like through his website. I never heard nothing back yet, but it could happen. But he
Yeah.
fucking at least responded on Twitter. I'm like, that's crazy.
Yeah, you won't even believe it. Like you'll tag someone, then they'll retweet it in like 5 minutes, and you're like, "Oh shit, I already connected with them."
I remember Elvira retweeted one of my tweets or something, and I had like 6,000 likes or some shit. It was the only time this has ever
Oh
happened
damn.
before. I was like, whoa, I mean, that's crazy.
See.
What are some future things you're working on? Are you working on anything now or?
Yeah, I'm writing a new script now that it's my take on the possession body horror genre, and
Mm-hmm.
it takes place in Miami in the '80s, and I'm Colombian. I'm Colombian American. My parents immigrated from Colombia in the '80s, and so growing up, that was very much like my culture. Like my Spanish was my first language, and just the music and the food and all the traditions. And so now I'm writing a film that it's about an immigrant who comes to Miami and sort of her the decay of her cultural identity, but shown through a possession film.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm excited to finish writing that. Hopefully, I'll make it some point this year, if not next year, but hope I'll be on set soon to some degree.
How far along are you right now on it, you think, if you had to like give a percentage?
If I had to give a percentage, I would say I'm like 80. 83% or something like that.
Well, that's good.
So it's close. It's close. Um, but just like building these things from the ground up takes so much time, and finding the money, finding producers, and just like packaging a film. But I was luckily with this film, I was able to find representation, and my agents and my manager are really good, and my lawyer. So I feel like with that team, they're really going to help me package it into something a little bit bigger than my last film. So I'll be able to try things that perhaps I couldn't because of such a low budget.
Hmm.
So I'm excited to get that going.
That sounds killer. I love possession movies. Like The Exorcist is one of my favorite films of all time. So anything to do with that kind of stuff, I love the cult and everything like that. So
Yeah, I'm excited to throw my spin on it. We'll see if it works or not.
I'm glad you're saying you're not doing a zombie movie. So that's good.
Not yet. I don't know. Maybe at some point, but I feel like the best of them have already come. Like 28 Days Later is like really cool, but I don't know if I would do that right now. And I feel like you need a pretty big budget for those unless you're going for like an intimate version, but I don't know. Not for me right now.
Yeah. And like I said, 28 Days Later kind of set the bar for zombie films after, That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, the rabid zombie. They like sprint. Scary as hell.
Yeah, more realistic. I've seen a few of those around the neighborhood, but
I
I
hope
think that's
not.
just
Shit.
drugs. Yeah. That's killer. I'm looking forward to like your future projects and stuff, man. Like right now you're killing it. I mean, you got the Fangoria stuff going on, like doing really well. It's
Yeah.
awesome. Like,
Yeah, I'm very grateful to just be in circulation, like being seen by horror fans and just movie fans in general. Like it's very easy for film, especially at this level, with not we don't have like a huge budget for advertising and stuff. It's cool to see that our film has kind of slipped through the cracks and been seen by a decent amount of people, and like to be on Shutter. So my brother and I are always like thankful. We're always talking about it. Like we feel grateful that it's been able to exist.
I heard about it from the podcast, the last podcast on the left. I think it was Henry
Oh
that was
yeah,
talking
yeah, yeah.
about it on there, and I was like, oh, that sounds fucking killer because they're big horror people, of course, and stuff. And I think that's where I heard about it the
Nice.
first time. So that's pretty fucking cool.
Nice. Yeah, I heard about that like through other reviews, like people mentioning that podcast. So that's cool.
Yeah, and that's a huge podcast. So I was like, oh, and I usually go by a lot of their recommendations because Henry's got a really good taste in horror movies. They all really do. So like, if they suggest something, I'll
Yeah,
usually check it out.
nice. Well, you see, it's stuff like that that just helps, and that's not even like planned. It's just like a very organic way of reaching more people because people trust him, like you're saying, and I'm sure he has great taste. So that's awesome.
I know in my little social network, I've had at least 10 or 20 people check out the film, and I've heard all positive stuff from them. So,
That's amazing. Yeah.
uh, my friends over at the Necromaniacs podcast just did a whole episode on the film. I think like 2 episodes ago, and they fucking love it. And like they break some stuff down and stuff. And so, yeah, if you want to check
I
that
think
out,
I
it's
heard
really
that
cool.
one.
Yeah,
I
the
think I heard
Necro.
that one actually.
Have you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're very cool guys. They sound
yeah,
like very nice guys.
they are, man. They're good friends of mine and stuff. And they've been guests on my podcast. I'll be a guest on their podcast every once in a while. Like, it's just really killer. And, they really
Sweet.
dig film. So
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I discovered so many podcasts just off this film.
there's so many podcasts out there. Like, it's crazy, man. Like, it's a lot. But there's a lot
Yeah.
of good stuff out there. Like, podcast is a way to
Yeah.
go, I think, you can get a lot of
Yeah.
information out and touch a lot of people.
Yeah, your podcast is good too. I'm
I
following it
appreciate
now.
it. It's
Yeah.
weird, man, because I'm still not even used to hearing my own voice back at me when I'm editing and all that stuff. It's like I can hear myself scream all day long or growl or whatever when I was playing music, but like hearing myself talk, it's so fucking weird. But I'm getting used to it. It's been
It
a lot.
is
I've been
weird.
doing this for like, what's that?
It is weird. Yeah.
I've been doing this for like a year and a few months now with the podcast. I was running my website before then when I write reviews, and I was doing written interviews at the time. And I was like, I want to expand a little bit. It's like, I'm going to try this, it ain't been easy, like making myself like, come out of my shell a bit.
Yeah.
I love doing it. It's fun as hell. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. It is weird to hear your own voice, but it's cool to hear. Sometimes I'll play back some of the conversations I've had just to see how I did, but it's just fun and it's cool to have that memory instead of, I think it's a little bit more valuable than a written interview.
It is. It's more personal.
Yeah, totally. And it's a good conversation.
Exactly. Like I'm still gonna do my reviews, and I still do, but like I like podcasting more than anything so far. So, and I don't have to deal with the fucking my website host. I can't remember the name of it right now who I go through, but they like to change
Mm.
up pictures I add on my website. Like if I'm reviewing a film and I throw some art on there or whatever, they just randomly change it to some shit I posted like 2 years ago. I'm like, that
Whoa.
makes me like a fucking idiot. I'm like, that's why are you doing this? And it's a common
Yeah,
problem with this host that I use, and to take all that
yeah,
shit off and move it to a different host, it's gonna be such a pain, but it needs to be done sometime this year. I'm like, ah.
yeah, yeah. That can be annoying sometimes.
Podcasting, man, I use a Buzzsprout and I just throw everything up on there and everything's there. They're fucking awesome, and I have no issues. So much easier doing it that way than
Nice.
running a website. But
Yeah, yeah, but
well, Jonathan, it's been great talking with you, man. I really appreciate you being on my podcast.
yeah, it's been fun. I hope to
Well,
be
Jeff,
back on maybe on my next project or something.
I was about to say the same thing. Hell yeah. As soon as you got anything out, like whatever you want to talk about, even if it's just talking horror, whatever, just hit me up and we'll talk because it's been fucking fun, man.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it. You have a good rest of your weekend.
All right, you too, man. Take
Later.
care.